So for the Longhorns, it took them about 27 minutes in the ball game against the Baylor Bears in Waco, Texas, to kind of finally realize we need to wake up and play some basketball. And finally, when they woke up from their deep, deep slumber, Texas played better, they looked better, and they looked partially like the team that they once resembled back when they won 11 straight games during the beginning of the conference season. The Longhorns played against the Baylor Bears in the last regular season game of the 2011 season, and they won the ball game 60-54. This was the last ball game during the week for Texas leading up to the Big 12 tournament. It was a pretty good game in the second half, but when you look at that first half, though, by Texas, the Longhorns really accentuated a lot of their problems that they've experienced in this kind of mini slump that they've had over the last 4 games, when the Longhorns went 1-3 in that time period. In that first half, Texas just was not very awake on defense. Texas was not rotating. Texas was not playing very well. They weren't keeping on the players for Baylor. Baylor was able to find open shots and get it to the people that they needed to. Most importantly, Lace Darius Dunn, their quick shooting guard, and their forward Quincy Acey. Baylor was able to find those two gentlemen and get them the ball and shoot well. So credit Baylor for confusing Texas. The Longhorns just were not able to get around a lot of the screens and quick drives that Baylor had in this ball game. But one has to remember, Texas has had these problems, and it's kind of troublesome, at least in the first half of that ball game, to see Texas struggle in that sense. Offensively, though, and once again, the struggles we talked about with Texas in the previous two-game losing streak, in that first half, in the 7 minutes in the second, Texas looked about the same in terms of offense. They were sluggish to start off. They didn't shoot well. They didn't do very well from the three-point line, and they kept trying to force shots and trying to make too much happen. In other words, the Longhorns seemed like they were pressing. They weren't playing Texas basketball, which is a little bit free, which is going on the inside offensively and pounding it in the paint. And on defense, they weren't playing as free on defense. They were not clogging up the lane and playing well and rotating around. Instead, Texas looked stagnant, they looked slow, and they looked very sluggish. At about the 13-minute mark of the second half, though, Texas woke up. They woke up, and Jordan Hamilton came to play. He did very well. He scored 14 points in the ball game. He was helped out by Tristan Thompson and Gary Johnson. Both those guys played very well. Thompson scoring 19 points and Gary Johnson scoring 15 for the Longhorns. They played exceptionally well on offense and defense in that last 13 minutes of the ball game. They helped Texas regain their positioning inside the lane and force Baylor to basically hack at the Longhorns. In fact, Texas was on the free throw line quite a bit. They were on the free throw line 27 times compared to Baylor's 13 at the charity stripe. So Texas was playing a little bit more aggressive, especially in that second half. Now, with the aggressiveness, though, I think a lot of people once again realize, and this is once again going a little bit back to the negative part with Texas, the free throw shooting. The fact that Texas once again was not very good shooting the ball from the charity stripe. 16 for 27 from the free throw line, 59% on the evening against the Baylor Bears with the Longhorns. For Baylor, though, even though they only got to the line 13 times, they were 10 of 13. That's good for 76%. Once again, it accentuates a problem with Texas, the free throw shooting. They have got to find a way to fix it. But at the end of it all, though, I think we can all give Texas a pass, at least for one evening. The fact that Texas didn't follow the same kind of script that they had against Nebraska, against Colorado, and against the most recent loss against Kansas State, they didn't follow the same kind of script, which was once the 10-minute mark passed in the second half, Texas again in those three losses, would panic, press a little bit more, and really hurt themselves by just trying a little bit too hard. Against Baylor, though, they didn't quite panic as much. They relaxed. They just played their brand of basketball, and it worked. Baylor was not able to stop Texas. Texas was able to play their game and play it well. Credit Baylor though, and I think what's kind of once again it's kind of missed here. Baylor's very good. I mean, they're not spectacular, but they were pretty good. Baylor was led by their leading scorer, Darius Dunn, who had 22 points, leading the Baylor Bears scores, leading all scores on the night in the ball game. So give Baylor credit. In that first half, they played really well. They shut down Texas offensively and defensively. Texas was confused by what Baylor was doing, which was switching between a man-type defense and a zone-type defense. They were switching it off, and Texas was confused in that first half on which set Baylor was in and what they were doing. Once Rick Barnes kind of fixed it, though, Texas did a better job in offense, and they were able to move around a little bit more and have a little bit better success shooting the basketball. So Texas won the ball game against Baylor. They defeated the Bears 60-54, a very closely contested ball game. The Longhorns, though, end up winning, and they improved their record to 25-6, 13-3 in Big 12 play, whereas the Baylor Bears fall to 18-12 and 7-9 in conference play. So for the Horns, the good news is the conference tournament's coming up, and we're getting close to March Madness. The bad news, the conference tournament is here. An interesting question was posted on the Texas blog site, burnorangenation.com, and it was posted by the lead contributor, Peter Bean. And this is an interesting question I think a lot of people should kind of, I guess, maybe put their opinion on. Is the Big 12 tournament worth it to the Texas Longhorns? Is this tournament worth it for the Horns, who have already, at least more than likely, secured themselves a NCAA berth? Because, I mean, let's face it, the Big 12 is a very good conference. There's going to be at least the top four seeds in the Big 12 tournament. They've already locked their ticket and punched their ticket into the tournament. That would be Kansas, Texas, Texas A&M, and Kansas State. Those four are going to make it regardless. Whether or not they win in their first round or not, they're going to get there. But the question really becomes, and I think it goes to a lot of other tournaments, especially the Big East, because they got about 16 teams in that league. Is the conference tournament worth it for a lot of these teams? Will winning this tournament really give the Longhorns, or any other team for that matter, a leg up going into the latter part of March into the NCAAs, into the field of 68? That's an interesting question to be posed to everyone else out there. Is it worth it? I guess from my standpoint, not really. It's not really worth it to go that far. Is it great for the program? Absolutely. It's great for any program to win their conference tournament. The thing is, though, I think for a lot of other conferences, like the Southland Conference, like the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, like Conference USA for that matter, smaller conferences, it means more because they're not going to have more than one team make the tournament. But for the Big 12, for the top four and maybe even the top 6 seeds on a good year, even the top 8 seeds in a good year, they're going to make the tournament. So playing and winning at least 3 to 4 games, it's not really worth it, especially if you're in Texas's position where you have a first round bye and you've already at least given yourself at somewhere between at least a 2, I should say, a 2 through a 6 seed in the NCAAs. It's not really worth it. Peter Bean on the Burn Orange Nation kind of also accentuated that point as well. I just wanted to extend that to you, the viewer out there, and leave your comments on your opinion on that. Do you think this is a worthwhile cause for Texas? But as we stand, the Longhorns are in the tournament, the Big 12 Championship tournament. So for Texas, they are the 2nd seed overall, and once again, Texas lost the 1 seed to Kansas after they lost to Kansas State last week. It's all said and done now. The Longhorns have the 2 seed, and they got a first round bye. They don't play until Thursday afternoon. Thursday night, 6 o'clock, and all the Big 12 games are going to be held at the Sprint Center in Kansas City, Missouri. So a semi-neutral site. I say semi-neutral because Kansas and Missouri are pretty much right in the area, but I mean it's semi-neutral. But even so, Texas has that first round bye. They will face against the winner of the 7 and 10 seed between the Baylor Bears and the Oklahoma Sooners, both of which Texas swept during the regular season. So for the Longhorns, they could get one of those two teams. They've swept them both times during the year. We've kind of talked about Baylor. Oklahoma, they've been struggling this year. Jeff Capel's squad is really in tumult right now. So you could probably see Baylor moving on in that first round game on Texas' side of the bracket. So probably another matchup between Texas and Baylor. Very interesting. It's very difficult to beat a team 3 times. Should Baylor win, it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in one season. Beyond that, on the other side of Texas' bracket, the Aggies are right now ranked 3rd. Texas A&M is ranked 3rd in conference, and they will get the winner of the 6-11 seed, which is 6-11 game, beg your pardon. That's going to be Missouri and Texas Tech. All 3 of those teams, by the way, Texas has beaten and or swept during the year. They beat Texas Tech both times, they beat Texas A&M both times, and they defeated Missouri in their one and only matchup back in February. So for Texas, on their side of the bracket, all those teams they've defeated. So if Texas, and by the way, I'm not going to say Texas will sweep through this without any struggle. By no means. Every team is very good, but Texas has a very good chance of at least playing well, at least matching up well against the other 5 teams in their side of the bracket. On the other side of the bracket, though, is where it gets really interesting. Number 1, Kansas, and number 4, Kansas State. Those 2 squads, the Sunflower State teams, they both have the bye on the first day of play. That's Wednesday afternoon. Kansas will play the winner of Nebraska and Oklahoma State. That's going to be a very good ball game. Both those teams are going to be fighting for their conference tournament, for their NCAA tournament lives. Both those teams are not guaranteed a tournament spot, so they have to fight well. As well as Colorado. Colorado's one of the last 4 teams out, or they were one of the last 4 teams out, according to Joe Lunardi's bracketology, and this was about last week. So Colorado, and by the way, the Buffaloes lost Nebraska last weekend, so right now they're teetering pretty much on the edge of not making the NCAAs. They will play against Iowa State in the first game. The winner of that Colorado-Iowa State game will go up against number 4 Kansas State on the second round of tournament play. That's where again it's interesting, though. Kansas and Kansas State do not match up well with Texas, I guess from a Longhorn standpoint. Both of those 2 squads are very good, and Texas, even though they played well against Kansas, it's very difficult to beat Kansas twice in one year. But you can easily see that Kansas and Kansas State, should they play well, and if there are not any surprises that may arise, I can probably see Kansas and Kansas State facing off for the right to go to the final on Saturday afternoon. And so we'll kind of see what happens in that top side of the bracket. But to go back to Texas, the Longhorns, they have the first round bye. I'm not going to say Texas will get to the final, but I think if they play the way that they did in that 11-game win streak following the UConn loss, the sky's the limit. For the Longhorns, though, it's all going to come down to this. Can they keep the intensity on the inside part of the paint? Can they rebound well? And I guess that goes with that as well. But also, can they shoot the free throws well? And that's kind of one of the biggest points for Texas. Because when we get down towards the NCAA season, can the Longhorns shoot free throws well? They haven't so far during the regular season, and we all know, at least for those of us who watch basketball, we know that a team that doesn't shoot free throws well loses more often than not in the second or even third round, or even in the first round of NCAA tournament play. For the Longhorns, though, they can take a little bit of a break. They can wait to see who they're going to play in that first round, either Baylor or Oklahoma. Texas, though, is in the NCAAs, but a little bit of business will have to be done between now and then.